Good evening. My presentation is titled Breaking the Cycle. Since the beginning of time, African Americans were put at a disadvantage, starting with the enslavement and imprisonment by the white man, by planting fear and belittling the confidence of people in slave communities. It is quite arguable to say that the first broken families lie within large plantations, owned by wealthy, educated white men. Even after the abolishment of slavery in the United States in 1865, the war continued, still holding black people, my people, down. My ancestors were deprived of proper education, lack of food, and stripped of their rights. This kept us quiet for many years, but I'm here to say that our government is still failing us as a people. The year is now 2020, meaning 150 years has passed since the abolishment of slavery. Nothing has changed though. The government is still continuing to fail black communities. Furthermore, my people are failing themselves. The central root of our problems lies back to one main conflicting problem. That is in fact poverty. Poverty is having an unlimited amount of resources. Poverty may include social, economic, and political elements. Cherry Hill is a small community located in the south side of Baltimore, Maryland. This is a place I can call home. Starting from the earlier years of my childhood, I grew and developed in this very neighborhood. This is where I was raised, and quite frankly, this is all I know. While I enjoy walking up and down the streets of my neighborhood, visiting the local shopping center, and listening to children play outside, I realized that my small town was quite broken. After World War II, many African American soldiers came home from war with little to nothing. Cherry Hill was built to house soldiers coming home from the war, allowing them to stay in subsidized housing with little to no stores. Today, one can see a shopping center that holds a mini-mart, carryouts, and a Family Dollar. From early morning to late at night, my neighborhood shopping center is filled with older people who have lost hope and struggling from drug addiction. My generation occupies the corners of my neighborhood, feeding the addictions of the druggies. We live by a code that if you see something, simply keep quiet. My generation believes that selling drugs and wearing the latest fashion of clothing equates to success. Black man walks the streets of neighborhoods with Nike shoes they can barely afford. That is their trophy. They wear designer belts as how a king will wear his crown. That is their cheap reward until they're cheated of their life after a petty gunfight. While there are a few success stories that come from this small town, many men and women fail to make it out of the projects. Children grow up and raise their children in the projects of Cherry Hill, and the cycle continues. This is what many people know. This is the easy way out. It is sad but not surprising that children leave broken households to barely get an education across the street from their home. It is sad but not surprising that children are pushed through the education system with a high school diploma but no college degree. It is sad but not surprising that many children look forward to cafeteria lunches because some of their parents struggle to make ends meet. It is sad but not surprising that the smartest child is looked at as the laughingstock, while the most ignorant and misled child is socially acceptable. We have adopted these options as normalities, as it plagues the community, leading to ignorance and a repeating cycle of lost dreams. We misled our young black boys by forcing this idea that the appropriate way of coping with the absence of a father is filling his body with drugs and illegal substances. The little boy searches for love and inserts himself in a gang of violence. Our little girls are making more babies than what they can afford because there was no one ever around to explain the real definition of love. This is normal for a little black kid growing up in the projects. This is their story. Our resources are present but scarce, as we are robbed of grocery stores, and our mini-marts and carryouts are substitutions for such. According to Los Angeles Times, researchers wrote that the supermarket shortage appeared to be more severe in urban black neighborhoods than rural ones, suggesting that strategies to improve access to healthy food should not be rolled out nationwide, but targeted at disadvantaged urban areas. What this means is that the black community is short of food and supply. A Family Dollar is simply not enough to feed a community. one must leave his neighborhood to enter a more privileged neighborhood to have access to proper food and household items that are not present in his or her local stores. It is purported that even Latino communities have access to more grocery stores despite poverty rates. According to the short article, The Intersection of Neighborhood Racial Segregation, the relationship between neighborhood and racial composition and food store availability has primarily been studied in urban areas and has consistently found neighborhoods with higher proportions of black residents have fewer supermarkets, longer distances to supermarkets, and more grocery stores. Our education system continues to fail our children as they are pushed through school without grasping the concept of what it truly means to be educated. The youth continue to walk the streets of urban communities, getting entangled in mischief and involved with the police. 20.8% of African Americans face poverty within their own communities. In other words, it is about 8.9 million people. We are being failed as a people. There is still hope, however. Poverty does not have to flourish in my community. It must first start with the people, however. Knowing the value of a dollar makes all the difference. Learning to save at a young age will be quite effective for that child in later stages of their life. According to MarketWatch, the U.S. government has a long history of facilitating wealth for white Americans. What this means is that even after ending slavery in the U.S., former African American slaves were put at a disadvantage. From at least, Congress sought to transfer wealth to citizens on terms that were quite favorable. In some instances, land could be attained by the lack of the draw, but only if you were a white man. This trend remained the same for the next few years. Even 100 years after the emancipation, African Americans were more than 10% of the population, but they still held less than 2% of wealth. They were not even considered during the New Deal in the 1900s, which set blacks at a huge setback and disadvantage. We must teach our children that the worth of a dollar. We must teach our children the worth of a dollar to break this reoccurring cycle. We must teach our kids that if we save, we simply win. Teach them to save their money instead of running to convenience stores and cheap corner stores. This is a job for both the mother and the father. In the short article, Children in Poverty, children are more likely to be poor if they live in a family headed by a single mother than if they lived in a married couple family. Why stop raising children by two parents? It literally takes a village to raise a child. We must discard ignorant ways of thinking in our communities by keeping quiet when wrong is done. We must teach our children that violence is never the answer. Furthermore, we must teach our children to lend a hand to a broken brother or sister rather than diminishing his or her confidence. It is incumbent that children are supplied with proper playgrounds and recreation centers. This is our duty, and we cannot fail our children. This is not an option. Did you know that in 1991, there were only $37 million spent on recreations and parks, but $165 million spent on the police department? This speaks volumes. What this means is that our communities, specifically black communities, are being treated as an alternative rather than an option. Rather than a necessity, In conclusion, the fight must first start with us as a people. We must first attack the force that continues to plague our communities and sweep poverty out of black communities expeditiously. After-school programs should continue to still exist to help children struggling with curriculum. Subsidized housing should only be a holding place for new families, but this should not be a place to raise generations. Again, we must break this recurring cycle that threatens the black community. Generations lie ahead for a change. We are that change. Thank you.